Vivo sako tukuna. Awasenga ni mai baka waletaka. Baleti kombona. Mai vuni no gusika lutundina. Ena bimbongi nyondo yambe malua. Que muy boy e camida. Ramai soro na manu manukila. Bula vila. Sakena ngauna. Funde mai, funde ani. Funde mai, funde ani. Soso vole kamai. Tuana bilo endai. Funde mai, funde ani. Funde mai, funde ani. Talo si nai. Bongi ni nunu endai. Ena nungu marai lesu. Na nungu mbula. Au baka bina bina katunga. Yadona baka dengu.
Today, welcome to Inner Oneness. Inner Oneness is an 8-part series hosted by GRC's Pono program to center mental health and wellness from a native Hawaiian Pacific Islander lens. Special shout out to our sponsors and the people who have made this series possible: GRC Pono program, Elevate Healing, New Hope Counseling, and the King County Pacific Islander Task Force. Also want to give thanks to the Voice of South Pacific, a local Islander radio station focused on broadcasting the latest in the Pacifica, who have graciously agreed to stream our series for folks to tune in. Akan. My name is Leslie Finn, she, her, and I am the Pono Project Coach here at GRC, and I have the honor of serving as today's co-host for today's session. I'm going to pass it on to our other co-hosts to introduce themselves and open today's session.
Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day, I'm sure, to just invest in yourself in regards to mental health. And if this is your first time tuning in, just FYI, this is our last and final community conversation in this series, and it's been such an amazing conversation with our communities that's been chiming in throughout the entire series. I think this conversation is also a great treat for us. We always hear of compassion fatigue, but today's topic is about cultural fatigue and what that is. So before I go forth, if you haven't been tuning in before, and this is your first, why we partnering with a lot of our sponsors to make these conversations available and accessible for our community. But we're super duper excited to get this conversation going. So again, today's conversation topic is cultural fatigue. What is it and do I have it? And so, like I said before, we always hear of compassion fatigue. That's what we hear a lot. And when Scarlett and I were kind of putting all of these different conversations together, we were going off of what we were getting from our communities of what they were going through. So all of our different caseloads, anybody with NHPI and issues that they presented to us in therapy, we just sort of like put together these series addressing some of these topics. And so cultural fatigue is definitely one that comes up a lot. And so you hear Scarlett and I probably share like a lot of our stories of experience with clients in our community that just have experienced what cultural fatigue is. So I won't give off any more. I'm just gonna, I know I'm like want to get this going, but I'm gonna give it over to my amazing colleague Scarlett to get us started on this conversation today.
Awesome, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for so much for being here. Sala, thank you for the pass off. And so again, we just want to continue to thank you all for being in the space for us, but we also have to give a major shout out. And he's not here. He's our go-to person who advocates for us and that we're able to be in these spaces. We got to give to Tausili Kalepo. We also got to give a shout out to Dr. King because we met with her a couple of times and we appreciate her for believing in us us, even though she didn't really know us. And so we just want to thank you and give honor to you for that, and for Green River College, and for the students who are in attendance as well. So we just want to give credit and thank you for where it is deserved. So before I go any further, my name is Scarlett Ekaroma. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach. I've been in this field for over a decade. I work through my private practice, Elevate Healing, and not only do we get to do these amazing classes, we, across the state of Washington, and we are slowly expanding into the states of Oregon and California. We're super blessed to be doing this work, and we actually have, not actually, but we actually enjoy, and we have a passion for teaching our community about these topics, because again, you don't get to hear these topics unless you actually come see a therapist like us, or you pay to see, or you pay for a class like this. And we're so, again, thankful for our sponsors who are able to do this for the community, so that you all can attend free. So I'm excited about today's community conversation. Sal and I always say this is one of our favorites, because every topic is our favorite, because we love what we do. And it's such a joy to actually hear from you all, especially those who are in attendance, and all the light bulb moments that you all have, whether you share it personally or whether you or share it to us in privately. So we just want to continue to encourage you all to share with us. And so there is no question that we will not answer at whatever to the topic of tonight. So here's a little bit of housekeeping rules. So Sala and I will be presenting. I'll be presenting the first half, and then Sala will be presenting the second half. So if you have direct questions for me while I am presenting, please send them to Sala, because I won't see them, because I'll be presenting. When Sala is presenting, please send the questions directly to me if you don't want to share it, so that we can make sure that we get all questions answered. Because even if you're sharing, we just want to make sure that we address everything that comes to us. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we can get this party on the road.
Mhm. And I mean, you can message us the questions, or you can just unmute yourself and ask the questions. I mean, we really appreciate when people are just very open and just engaging with us. And so, because it's a community conversation, is what we hope for, is just engagement. So let us know if you have any questions, comments, or in the past, people have even shared their stories that's related to the topic that we are talking about. So feel free to do that. Unmute yourself, or just message in the chat, and we will read it off.
Absolutely. So again, just a little bit more of housekeeping rules. So again, please keep all questions and stories relevant to today's community conversation. And for anyone who's in attendance and anyone rewatching this class, this presentation and all its contents are protected by copyright law. Please do not teach or reuse any of our content without our written approval. You may submit written requests at our contact information located in the event summary. We had to start saying that because Sal and I would see our content being used without our permission. So those are just the house rules for today. So why are we talking about culture fatigue? Just like Sala said, we felt it was our duty to discuss these topics publicly, what was being discussed privately, because we would often see our people suffer, and we would often see our people suffer in silence. And the one thing that we know about culture in its exposure and interaction of whatever culture is, it helps foster growth and understanding. And also what we can experience is the emotional and psychological strain that comes with culture sometimes. So especially we see this impact, especially in a lot of cross-cultural settings. So like for first generation, if you're the first generation here, immigrants or individuals or people who are working in diverse communities. So cultural fatigue is often too familiar, and it's often misunderstood or invalidated. So today's real main goal in regards to culture fatigue, what is it and do I have it, is to help you increase self-awareness so that you may do differently and better for yourself. So here's what we will explore today. Really simple agenda that we have on today. So we'll do an introduction and definition of cultural fatigue and its impact. We'll intro and break down the cultural fatigue cycle that Sal and I have created. And then, of course, what we always like to end on is self-care tips that you can use with immediacy. You do not have to wait. And these are tangible things that you all can start using, again, with immediacy. So again, if you have questions or you would like to share, you do not have to wait to the end. You can ask in the midst of while we are doing whatever we are presenting. And if you are on any of the social media platforms, put it in the comment, and then we'll make sure that we answer and read your put it in the comments, and we'll make sure that we answer those as well, because all chats will be monitored. So let's talk a little bit about culture. Now, why is culture important? Because it is. It's a huge part of our identity. It's a huge part of who we are. The one thing that culture does, which I love, is it helps keep our native customs alive and relevant due to acculturation. So acculturation, by definition, is adapting and assimilating to a different cultural norm outside of your native homeland. So you're typically the dominant one, which, for example, us living here is in the United States, especially me being born in Samoa, there was a lot of acculturation that had to happen. And then the other part of this, the great thing about culture, now this is not an exhaustive list, it impacts, our behavior, whether it's individually or the group. And a lot of it can be an expression in language and how we move, and also how we problem solve. So one of my first questions or two questions that I have for you all is, what are ideas or thoughts do you have when you hear the phrase cultural fatigue? And do you think, or do you have cultural fatigue, or know someone who does? Floor is open. You can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself. And there's no wrong answer. Let me say that. Okay.
Yeah, and even if we don't know, right? Because like I said, we often commonly hear compassion fatigue, but we never really, like, this is literally something that we just, as we're putting this together, and we're like, compassion fatigue, yes, that's what it, but it's, we're always trying to add that cultural piece into our conversations. And so it makes sense if not a lot of people are like, what is cultural fatigue? And so I think when I hear of cultural fatigue, I'll just share like an experience, right? Because then experience that I've seen someone go through, where, like, just to the point where they are maybe, I think, at the point of burnout, and we'll talk about the burnout later on in this conversation, but they're at the point of just burnout from culture. And this is culture not in the sense of, it can be in the sense of like your ethnic culture, or it could be like your work culture, right? There's so many different types of cultural setting, but I think this individual was more so at the point of burnout from being immersed in their own culture, to, I think there was also that lack of boundaries there, to the point where they were burnt out, and they were depressed, they were severely depressed. And so this is what brought them into the therapeutic space. Right. So I think when I hear of the word cultural fatigue, I think of this individual. And you and I, Scarlett, have talked about how often we do see that people from our communities coming into therapy, and they're just at the point where, I don't want to have anything to do with my culture. I don't want to have anything to do with, being Chinese. I don't want to have anything to do with being Samoan, being Tongan, so we kept seeing that a lot. And as we're kind of looking into these things and hearing people's stories on it, we're like, oh, okay, like
race, and I feel an overwhelming pressure to represent any of my cultures enough. I never feel like I can do enough to represent either of them. Woo, that's deep. Because I'll say, and to add on to that, it almost seems like it's a never ending well, like you can never do enough. And it's tiresome. And so when I think of cultural fatigue, I think of being overwhelmed. Because like I said, Sala said a little bit earlier, like her and I, like we had to talk about like how we were impacted by cultural fatigue when we were coming up with this topic. And it was I remember one of the things I said for me was just like excessive strain. Like there's nothing wrong with strain. Like there's strain is what it is, but when it becomes excessive, it's like, man, this is where now I'm feeling overwhelmed. Now I can't, do focus clearly because of whatever this cultural aspects, like the internal cultural pressure that I was putting because of external cultural pressure that I was receiving. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. Anybody else want to share? Okay. If you still need time to think, I got you. So here's some, Sal and I actually presented this this topic to some of our colleagues. So these are other Pacific Island therapists. And these are some of the things that they had said when we had talked about it, because they were recognizing for themselves of the cultural fatigue that they were experiencing. So some of the things that came up for them, they were managing feelings of respect versus disrespect. They were feeling like they always had to defend who they were and who the culture was. There were various degrees of pressure received externally, which then added internal pressure. There was a lot of societal of family expectations. So it was the older generation versus the newer generation, which we will talk about. Then they chose to meet, I thought this was pretty telling. They chose to meet cultural expectations over self-care. So there was a lot of suffering in silence. Then, of course, there was a lot of psychosomatic symptoms. And so this is when you feel something in your body that is related to a mental or emotional disturbance. So they would feel fatigue, high blood pressure, insomnia, body aches, nausea, heartburn, or any physical stress. And then the other thing that they said, they always feel like they had to, when they were in the cultural event, they always feel like they had to one up somebody or show out. And I thought that was interesting because it's like, because that's that never ending well, it's never enough. Like you have to do more. There's always this external pressure that you have to do more, which then we internalize and say, oh my God, I have to meet this thing, or such and such is going to happen. I have to make sure that what it ends up being essentially is people pleasing. That's what ends up happening in cultural fatigue quite a bit. So we said all that to say, so let's actually define what cultural fatigue is. So this is the definition that Sal and I came up with. So cultural fatigue is a state of extreme, keyword extreme, psychological, physical, and emotional tiredness resulting from mental and physical exertion related to or related to navigating into, relating to the ideas, customs, and social behaviors of a society and ethnic culture. So key characteristics in this definition, it goes beyond general exhaustion and strain related to cultural engagement. It often occurs in situations of cultural adaptation or when there's a high demand to navigate multiple cultural expectations simultaneously, and they're always giving at the cost of their overall health and well-being. And oftentimes what's associated with cultural fatigue is feelings of guilt. Any questions, comments, and Sala, if you wanted to add anything?
I think just pointing out or emphasizing on the extreme, right?
Yeah.
I think like we can be fatigued and that's okay. Like, that's kind of a natural thing that happens when we are working a lot or something like that. So we can be fatigued. But I think the key here is extreme. And that involves, psychologically, physically, emotionally, like you mentioned in the definition. I think that's really good to kind of point out. It's that extreme point. And I think like also really important to note that this is what we were seeing in therapy from our communities and what prompted this conversation. Like we're not seeing people that are like, oh, I'm just stressed out about, having to do this for my family, or, I had to, it's like all these mandatory things for my culture. It's like like not complaining about it. This is like to the point where this person is experiencing not only a lot of physical ailments from stress and also experiencing severe depression. Like it is because of this, like it's just to that point. And the cause of it, I think like really can be alleviated.
Yeah.
Like I think like being able to like really help them have a conversation on things like like the boundaries that we discussed in a previous conversation. But this is what we were seeing in therapy, in the therapy space, from the people in our community, what they were experiencing, like to that point. So I think it's just important to kind of point out that extreme part of the definition.
For sure. And to continue to reemphasize what Sal and I have talked about in every single one of our previous community conversations is that we are not trying to replace culture. We're just trying to add to it so that we can do it differently for ourselves. Because again, like Sala just said, and we've shared plenty of times before, like we would just see our clients truly suffer. And so we had to talk with them again, how to balance that. And so that they can still be a part of whatever
Mhm.
cultural event that they want to be a part of and still take care of themselves. Like, because a lot of that, they were like, wait, you can do both? We're like, yeah, I'm a living testament of that, of doing both. And so a lot of what we had to teach is a lot of basically what we've taught in all our classes is to increase self-awareness and to state and how to state something effectively and actually mean it and actually not feel ashamed about it and actually still be respectful to whoever you're saying it to. Because that was, we had to teach we've taught a lot about with our clients privately in our sessions about how to say something effectively and be respectful, because our culture, especially Samoan culture, is a big time an honor culture where we honor our elders. And so we had to teach the language of like, how can we say that differently so that you can be heard? So this is why when cultural fatigue comes up, this is what we were seeing in our offices. So let's talk about some contributing factors to cultural fatigue. So this, again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are things that just we just saw that was common. So there's a lot of adaptation pressure. So there was a constant need to conform or to adjust to societal norms or values different from one's own. So again, it was putting culture before your own values. The one thing I love what Sala does, she always talks about coming from a place of your own values. You have to know what your values are. So, I always love when she definitely discussed those things. Another one is there's identity tension. So like someone mentioned a little bit earlier, so it's balancing personal cultural identity with societal expectations. And then there was also this feeling a sense of otherness or pressure to assimilate. And then lastly, emotions. We've talked about emotions in our Know Your Feelings. So there's this emotional labor that happens where you have to manage yourself and whatever you're a part of, and with whoever you're a part of, whatever system you're a part of, and to have it align with whatever cultural expectations there are. So there's a lot of suppressing of discomfort or frustration to avoid conflict. So why does this all matter? Sala mentioned a little bit earlier. She'll be talking about it later in one of the stages. Because it leads to burnout. There's also a reduction in emotional resilience, and oftentimes there's feelings of isolation. So again, it's that suffering in silence. Then, of course, we talked about a little bit earlier, there's some negative symptoms that are associated with this when you are on cultural fatigue. So it's financial stress. There's definitely physical and mental health ailments. What I've seen through my clients, there was short tempers, a lot of short tempers and anxiety, depression. And the biggest one that I saw because they had short tempers is because there was a lot of sleep deprivation. They weren't getting adequate or healthy enough sleep. And then, of course, there was the negative coping strategies that happened. And so what I would see is there was a lot of excessive smoking, drinking, or eating, or not eating enough. And then again, the suffering in silence. Go ahead, Sala.
Mhm. I was just going to add how all of these different contributing factors to cultural fatigue. One thing I saw mainly in my clients that presented with it was the ruptures that was happening in their interpersonal relationships, with families, friends, to the point where like, you said earlier, like just isolating themselves from community, not only community, but now it's like family members, like it's just everybody's getting cut off. Um, so it's like all of this, like when the clients that I did work with that was experiencing this, like it was at the point where these ruptures were just to the like they were cutting off family members. And for someone that, like for this specific client that I'm thinking of, for someone that valued their family, like that was one of their values, is their family and their relationship with their families, for this person to get to that point to where it's like cutting off everybody, from these ruptures. So and this is all what's contributing to it. And I think as we start to work on it, she recognizes how this could have been alleviated, or some of this pressure or stress or tension that she was experiencing leading up to it, because this is not like overnight. This is years and years of getting there. Could have been alleviated. It could have been, just a little bit maybe a little tweak on how she would respond to things,
Yeah.
implementing some things in her lives and decisions and things like that
Yeah.
could have changed it. Like she wouldn't have to be at that point where she's completely distancing herself from her own family, people that she valued so much, but it was just too much for this person. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to add that.
For sure. I think I love what, we get the honor of doing when we meet with clients is to um, help them increase their bravery in regards to how to identify what's going on with them. And so we do a lot of role playing. So it's like, let's practice what you're going to say and let's keep practicing so that you get comfortable with the words you need to say to whoever you need to say it to. Because, I think I've always said to people, like, you're not meant to do life on your own. You're just not. Otherwise, there literally be no one else here on this earth. And so we need the community, not saying like it's that you have to solely depend on it, but we all need different parts of our life. And one of those parts of life is to have a healthy community, or however you define it. Anybody have any comments, questions? Are we good in the chat, Sala? Awesome. All right. So let's talk about the cycle, the cultural fatigue cycle. Though we have this cycle, it doesn't mean it will go in order all this time. This cycle is flexible and it is not rigid. Sala and I just identified these phases in this order because this is what we see most of our clients commonly experience in this order. And so the great thing about this is each person's journey is different. Some of you will experience one phase and no other phases. Some of you will skip phases. Some of you will start at a different stage. So again, even though this whole thing is just a framework and just a guide to understanding, and it does not dictate anybody. This is just, again, purely psychoeducational. So in short, again, it's flexible and not concrete. You may start at a different stage, or you may experience these stages in any other order, or you may not experience a stage, or you may skip a stage. I will be doing stages 1 and 2. Sala will be doing 3, 4, and 5. So with our first stage, we have motivation and attraction. This stage is like, man, oh, nope, sorry, hold on. This stage, there's a bunch of energy. We're so excited to be a part of the event. There's a lot of high energy. I always like in this stage, and when we get to this phase, is there's a lot of bonding and belonging to the community that happens, because oftentimes in this stage, we often reconnect or see individuals we don't see regularly. And I give that as an example. When I'm a part of an event, like, people don't really see me all the time because I'm always doing something. So there's always this feeling of enthusiasm, there's eagerness to participate, and then there's this sense of pride and connection that fuels the motivation. The next thing that it does in the motivation and attraction stage, you're readily available and you're willing to go that extra mile to help with whatever the cultural success is. So again, a lot of excitement. You're ready to contribute any available time that you have, effort and resources. There's a strong desire to ensure that whatever the cultural event is, that it is highly successful. And then lastly is, you quickly and sometimes overly commit, but also you're ready to make a difference. In this part of the phase, we really don't think about the commitment that we're doing. We really just kind of jump into it. So we're jumping into responsibilities that not even thinking about or assessing our boundaries or our personal limits. And then we sometimes overcommit because we have this deep sense of pride and obligation to our culture. And then the other part is when we're ready, to make a difference, because we just think about the end result. Oh man, this is going to be so great. The people are going to see it. They're going to want to be, we're just going to have a lot of pride. So there's a strong drive to contribute meaningful, anything that's meaningful for cultural preservation and celebration. And then we offer an inspired, have a desire to leave a positive impact for the community, especially as adults, because we want to see our younger generation take over one day. So this is stage 1 of motivation and attraction. Sala, if there's anything you'd like to add, please do so. And if anybody has any questions or comments, please let us know.
I think just, I wanted to add about when you had the different stages, right? So just for everyone's understanding, all of these different areas or stages that we have up, these can be experienced months apart or years apart. It's not really like, okay, like I'm in this, stage 1 right now, and then 6 months later I mean, maybe, but it can also be I've seen people, go through like stage 1 for like maybe 2 years, right? And I think one of the examples I always see or use is when I look at the youth, when I look at the young people in our communities, and especially during, like, for example, like um the Samoan Flag Week that they would have down in Tacoma, right? So I see all of these different youth groups, like everybody's practicing their dances, their routines, like they get something prepared. Everybody is just dressed and adorned in cultural pieces throughout the week, right? Because they have so much pride, they are attracted to the dances. They want to learn more because it's part of who they are. They are motivated to learn. So I think of that, like I whenever Scarlett talks about this stage, I always think about the young people in our communities that are just eager to learn their culture, their the different traditions that's there. They want to learn the language. Sometimes I think about my 2 teenage boys that are like, every now and then they'll ask me to like teach them Samoan. I'm like, just because I know it don't mean I can teach it, okay? So I'm over here, like writing words of like Samoan ways of saying the fridge or the microwave, and putting little post-it notes up there. But I can see that they want to learn, right? They're motivated. They are attracted to it because when they go to a football game, all of their friends are over there with the flags and, all of these different things. They got the leis on during special occasions for their games. So it's like, I see those things as what attracts, like say, for example, the young people to their culture, right? They see everybody in our communities doing it. So I always use that example as a way for me to like kind of understand, like, yeah, this is how you're getting into your culture. Like, we're all excited to kind of get to know like this part of who we are, our how we say it in Samoan, our fasinomanga, so it's our identity, it's who we are. So we're eager, we're motivated to learn, and that's what this initial, I want to say, like, this is what this initial phase is.
Yeah, and I love that you pointed that out. It can happen for years, and so each stage
Mm-hmm.
can happen for months, weeks, and
Yeah.
so even when I think about stage 5, which I know you'll go over, I was in there for probably like 3 years. I'm like, nope, not doing it. Leave me alone. Let me know how it turns out. So, like I said, these are all again, this is not something like, I love how thank you, Sala, for saying that this is not like, okay, 1 week I'm going to be in this state and next week I'm going to be in that, tomorrow. No, it is where you are at. So that's why we talked about, like, everybody's journey is their journey. It is your own. It is not anybody else's. Now, will people impact these stages, who you come across? Absolutely. Absolutely. So anybody have any questions, comments about stage 1? No? All right.
I have Sadie being on.
Go ahead.
Sadie Blocker, my co-host.
Go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you. It's always good to join you as community resources for our Pacifica folks. And yes, thank you for taking the time. And indeed, the subject matter itself of cultural fatigue, I believe we all share. Whether it's Samoan family or Tongan family or Fijian family or any of our Pacifica folks, as well as any other cultural backgrounds, that yes, it is true. For myself, I've been here, relocated from Tonga because of school about 50 years ago. And yes, the cultural fatigue is there, especially for us who came as young folks in 20s and experiencing a different culture here. The pull and push between, what the grandparents and our parents expect of us, it really does get into the mental health issue. And of course, I think it's even more highlighted with our own children or grandchildren that we have raised here in the U.S. So it is true, and sometimes it's we just get tired. We just get tired of having to handle all the different aspects of life, especially that you have one that you raised up, like for some of us, like Sylvia and myself. We were, we didn't move here until early 20s or so. And we've lived here all this time, and our children and grandchildren were raised here in the American or the Western type culture. And so, yes, the fatigue of pull and push and who do you please, for example, if we don't do what we were raised with, such as Sylvia and myself, it's like you are, you're not respecting what is expected of you. Whereas with our kids and grandkids who were raised here, they say you don't understand. You don't know what we go through, especially like in the age of, electronics. You don't know what we hear. You don't know what we mean. And of course, language then becomes a huge, big barrier. So thank you for the help and the resources you're pointing our way so that we can help with our own families.
Absolutely, for sure.
you,
And so thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that I have, especially when it comes to culture, especially when I was growing up, I'm always a person of curiosity. And I'm like, so explain to me why we got to do that. And so, because my whole thought, because I grew up in the United States, and just a point of transparency, my paternal grandfather made the executive decision for my family, because I said I was born in Samoa, and we left when I was 3 years old. He made the executive decision to move us all across the I grew up in Florida, and to move us across the United States, because he said he didn't want us a part of the cultural events that he was experiencing because of all of because he was a high chief and all of the responsibilities. So him being across the world, he didn't have to do all of that. And I remember him telling us, I don't want you guys to be a part of that. It's too much. And so that's the part of the cultural fatigue, because even though I am Samoan, born in Samoa, grew up in the state of Florida, we were still raised as a Samoan household. But when I got to see actually the fullness of Samoan cultural events, I go, oh, this is different. This is different. I'm like, what? Go ahead, Sala.
No, it really is, especially, and it still happens till today, right? I see so many families, especially families or people that have titles, and then families as well, right, that have decided to leave the islands to come to the US, and just for the simple fact that it's like it's almost like doing those family obligations here in the US is a little bit less stressful than doing it back home in the islands, because back home it's full-fledged. It is full-fledged, right? So, but here there's so many different ways that I've seen people tweak or just change different things about how they do presentations of the culture, and when they do it, it's just differently. They do it differently. And so I've witnessed so many families move from the islands to here, sometimes just to even get away from that. So when there's so many things going on back home, like funerals or just different things where like it really does kind of require that obligation as like a leader or something like that. I often see a lot of people kind of migrate to the US, just to be able to be away for that season, and then just kind of still send their monetary like help or something like that. Just because I think honestly, like back home in some, it is full-fledged, it's all very much the culture. I mean, I guess it's good in in that respect, like the culture and traditions are strongly alive, like it is alive and well. But it is, I do see a lot of our community members just really stressed out and experiencing a lot of depression over that. And so often why we want to have this conversation, so that way we can hopefully present just different ways that we can approach or navigate through these different cultural fatigue moments.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So stage 2 is ambivalence. So what ambivalence is you begin to have mixed feelings or thoughts after realizing the commitment required or needed. So this is where the reality of the cultural commitment comes in. So often, again, this part is part of the stage because you're starting to recognize all the requirements that need to happen. So there's requirements of your energy, requirements of your time, and requirements of your emotional investment, because you are emotionally invested. Again, so that because it's the excitement and the obligation that drives the participation, the commitment becomes really clear, and so mixed feelings start to emerge, and that's normal. It is okay, because when we have this mixed feelings, because of course there's a conflict that's going on within us, and so because you're trying to balance cultural obligations also with your personal life, your professional life, your career, and your family responsibilities, which can be honestly overwhelming. Me even saying that sounds overwhelming because I'm overwhelmed by saying that. So this may lead to feelings of guilt or frustration. Next is you question if you even want to participate and possibly begin doubting if you want to continue forward. This part of ambivalence, there's a lot of self-reflection that's going on. So again, you may start to ask yourself, do I truly want to do this? Is this actually aligned with my values and my priorities? And then you start to navigate some boundaries. Okay, if what, I don't know if I want to do that. What do I need to do? That I still want to be part of it, or do I want to? So again, there's a lot of ambivalence that's happening. So again, you start to recognize what your limits are, and then because a big thing you start to think about is, how do I preserve myself? And then the last one, tends to happen quite a bit during the stage of ambivalence, is you may disagree with individuals a part of the cultural events. So in this part of the phase, this is where I see the traditionalist, which is older generation, versus the modernist, the modern people of the current generation now. Because the older generation, for example, they just did it and didn't ask questions. You just knew you had to do it. Where the newer generations, they're like, so tell me why we're doing this. Like, they ask more questions. What should be happening? And so what I've observed in this ambivalent stage is individuals would lose motivation. They would lose the enjoyment of whatever the event is, and they would get extremely exhausted. There'd be some fatigue that set in. What I also noticed in this stage is that there was a lot of arguments, a lot of murmuring, and then a lot of complaining, and then resentment started to seep in. So in this phase, this is where I've always talked about with clients is when you're starting to feel this way, you have to approach somebody, you have to go to somebody who has effective conflict management skills, because again, it's the healthy communication that is needed to help navigate these difference of opinions, this ambivalence that doesn't cause you to feel estrangement, because you still want them to be a part of it. So because part of what I've always talked about with clients, when there is a disagreement, you have to attack the disagreement, not each other. So let's attack the problem and let's separate that so that you can still feel the value of whatever the cultural event that you're a part of. So again, it's separate the argument, separate the problem from the person, and let's attack, all right, let's come up with some solutions instead of attacking each other. So ambivalence can be, ambivalence can be a challenging stage because there are a lot of things that happen with it, because emotions start to set in. And again, the reality of what's going on in regards to whatever the cultural aspect is starts to set in as well. Questions, comments, and Sala, if you want to add anything as well.
I'll add in a bit. There's a question. How would you work with someone in therapy? Sorry. How would you work with someone in therapy experiencing ambivalence?
So for me, I would probably work with him in regards to tell me what's coming up for you. And then I would say, tell me what you're not saying that you need to say. Because a lot of times with ambivalence, we're not actually saying what we need to say, because we have a tendency to keep quiet. I think the other part is you know, really helping them find what the boundary is, so that we don't stay in the stage of ambivalence. And that's not saying you won't be ambivalent. It's just it's staying in it. We don't want to stay in it. So it's that, okay, do you still want to participate? And if you do, all right, tell me the things that you need to say. What are you feeling? And what's the reason for this? So those are some of the things that I would say in the therapy space. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if that was helpful.
Hmm. I would just add on to that too, like because you know, when with ambivalence, like you're you're not sure, right? So I would even just add like um finding clarity with whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Because with if there's no clarity, you would be in that state of ambivalence, right? So I think um uncertainties kind of seep in. And so I think however, like I think if my client presented with that, that would be one of the things I would explore with them. Like, how would we get clarity around, you know, whatever it is that you're feeling ambivalent about? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I definitely pull out the feelings wheel. I'll tell you that much. And
That'll
then
give you a lot of
that'll
clarity.
give you a lot of clarity. And it's because sometimes and this is why I'm always an advocate of, like, you have to use your resources. Again, as a
Mhm.
person who's been in this field for over a decade, I still use the feelings wheel because sometimes
Mhm.
I just don't know how I'm feeling and I need a resources to help point these things out. And so when we pull out the feelings wheel, for example, I pull it out, I said, all right, I write down all the feelings. Tell me which goes in each layer, and then tell me what's the reason for each of these feelings. So
Mhm.
again, because we talked about in our Know Your Feelings class, you have to address the root feeling, because oftentimes the root feeling is the one you ignore quite often.
Mhm.
Mm.
I would like just add one more with the, you know, if I'm going on with my example of like the youth that's in stage 1 is like super excited to
Yeah.
learn their culture, super motivated to participate in anything cultural, things like that. The excitement is there, you're learning. I think when it gets to this point, you know, where they're kind of unsure, and what I've seen is like for example, and I'll stick with the young people example, is young people eager, excited, motivated to learn about culture, and then when they do, sometimes sometimes they are not greeted with openness from their elders, or patience or patience from there. So what I see a lot is then they start to retreat because maybe they're trying to learn, and like what you said earlier about this generation are more prone to asking questions. They're inquisitive. They want to know why we're doing what we're doing. Maybe you know, in their parents' generation, it was like we're just gonna do what this is what's coming down from the top, and that's what we're gonna do. No questions asked. Sometimes asking question would be disrespectful. But this generation, they're a lot more inquisitive, and they're like, why are we doing that? Why are we giving money to our second cousin that's married to our uncles? That's like,
That
why are
I've
we
never
giving
met.
that, right? That I've never met
Never
before.
met.
Why are we contributing to this? So they ask a lot of questions, and sometimes it's often welcomed, by like, or it's often being dismissed by maybe like,
Yeah.
older people in their families and things like that. And so in this stage, now I start to see clients that are just kind of like, just not sure. They're like, I don't know, like I was motivated, I wanted to learn, and now they're saying like I asked too many questions. And so I start to see them in this ambivalence stage, just sort of retreat a little bit. Like I can see it, like I can see them just kind of like,
Yeah.
like, and now I don't want to go do this, I don't want to go do this to the Samoan cultural thing. I don't want to go do it because every time I go do it, my auntie's going to be over there yelling at me because I did it wrong. And now I'm embarrassed in front of family members. Now
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed in front of people that's all there.
Yes.
Like, they're saying that I didn't say this word correctly when I said it in Samoan or something.
Yeah.
So now so I see that a lot in this stage. And so this is often with the young people. I see that a lot. So just want to add
Yeah.
that.
No, I love that you said that, because I think the other part, what I've seen with our young people, is that I'm not sure the intention of the older generation, but I've seen the older generation make fun of the younger generation because they didn't know. And then they get stuck in the ambivalence and don't want to participate. So, and yes, Sal and I have had these conversations with our older generation, and it's a lot of fun. They are a hoot. So, any other questions, comments for stage 2 before we move forward? Good? Okay.
Another one.
No, not
Oh, go
necessarily a question, but just sharing the common experiences we have as a transplanted or, a migrated part of our folks who come here to the U.S. As I have heard the earlier speakers, it is true, the expectations that you grew up with from at home, like back in Tonga, and then it's just it's a tug at your heartstrings when you want to fulfill all and to the extent and the pressures of having to fulfill those requirements or those expectations. And yet, due to various reasons, including economic reasons, we can't do it all here. Whereas, for example, as you know, back on the islands, you grow your own vegetables and your own food. The bananas, the yams, the taros, and that come from your backyard. Whereas over here, if you want to take a basket of food over, for church or for someone who's visiting or someone who just had a baby or birthday, no, you don't grow that in your backyard. You've got to go to the store and buy them, and it's a lot higher than prices of rice or potatoes here. So I'm just sharing the common experiences we have, regardless what community or what your origin of heritage is. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's very different for sure. So, Sala, floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Auntie. Y'all excuse me. I'm over here munching on cough drops. Okay, so hopefully I can get through all of these without going into a coughing spell. But with ambivalence that we just talked about, so ambivalence, right? We're unsure. I think with ambivalence, it really ushers in or it ushers people into doing something out of pure obligation and duty. Right, so that's another sort of big area that we saw, so something that started off, if you could remember, like stage 1, where you have a lot of passionate intentions to get to know something, to participate, you're motivated to learn something. So it started off as that, but now it's turning into something that, like, it's more so like you're just going through the motion. So I see that a lot in our people, where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just giving because, like, I'm told to give. Your heart is not even in it. It's not, you don't even value it, but you're doing it out of what either could be purely obligation, or you're just kind of going through the motion. So that's another thing that we see. And you're doing it because you've always been doing it. And now it's like years and years of you just kind of giving out of pure obligation. Now something else is starting to come up, right? So now it's you see a little bit of, like, maybe resentment start to creep in. But when we're talking about this sense of duty and obligation, sometimes this is fueled by fear of perception or fear of disappointing people, fear of, if we think about, like, our communities, we're collectivistic in nature. And so it's almost like sometimes we're not fearful of, like, how I am being perceived, but I don't want people to talk bad about my family, my name, my family name. So it is out of, we keep doing what we're doing in all of these, these different cultural events and stuff. And it's fueled by sometimes our fear or of perception, fear of disappointing the people, other people in our extended families. And so we just keep doing it. So it can also be fueled by, what I often see a lot is by guilt or by shame. If I don't give, then, they're going to look at me as, like, oh my gosh, like, and then there's a lot of shame that's associated with it. I think I also recall excuse me. I also recall a individual that was often guilted by his parents for not giving the amount that was required or asked of him to give. And so the parents were always sort of saying all of these things kind of casually to guilt this, person into giving. And so this is, like I said, this strong sense of duty and obligation, just to continue to serve or to sacrifice, whether you are sacrificing your time, whether you're sacrificing your money or you're sacrificing your energy, and you just continue to do it out of pure duty and obligation. So let me say this though, a sense of duty and obligation can be seen as honorable. It can be a good thing, right? It can be a good thing. I take, for example, I always use the example of like being in the military or something, right? There's mainly in our I always speak on Samoan communities because I'm Samoan, but mainly in like the Samoan communities, it's such an honorable thing when you see when you see someone in your family is enlisting in the military or something like that. And so there's a lot of honor. And so it can be a good thing having this sense of duty, this sense of obligation. But, and I always say there's a but, if the cost of this duty and obligation is affecting you in a negative way, where it's affecting your relationship, it is affecting your marriage, it is affecting your job, it is affecting you financially to where and this is where we see this a lot too, is seeing our people just give so much out of duty and obligation to where they have sacrificed their, for example, rent, they have sacrificed paying their mortgage. They will go into like small loans, small business loans, just so that they can get the money to. And we all know those small business loans, like the what do you call that, Scarlett?
Interest rate.
The interest rates are just, it's just not good. It's not good. It's too high. Yes. And so, but we see this a lot. So, when Scarlett and I are saying like we want to talk about these things with our community, it's because we see it. We see this come into where our people are just so immersed in this sense of duty and obligation. Like I said, we're not saying it's a bad thing, it's good. However, if this sense of duty and obligation is affecting you, your individual life in a negative way, we really want to be able to like pause for a minute and let's consider, what's costing you. Because this is what we're seeing. We're seeing people stressed out to the point of severe depression. We are seeing people stressed out to the point of their stress is causing their blood pressures to rise. So it is seeping into their physical health as well. Financially, they are drained, but they just continue to give out of this strong sense of duty and obligation, right? So let me see if there's anything else I want to say about that. Scarlett, did you want to add anything to that?
I'll let Auntie Sylvia go first. She
Oh,
wanted to
sorry.
say.
Yeah, go ahead, Auntie Sylvia.
I think you already explained about it, but I just wanted to see that I have been witness and seeing a lot of it, happening in, it's more like a cultural thing. Giving of your time and money, even though you're struggling financially, but making our people, like in our PI communities, Tongan and Samoan, like we're obligated, to give. You always feel obligated. But then sometimes you go, even like in a church, that, with the tithe, you give them 10%, But on this kind of stuff here, it's gonna go beyond, the limit. You go and give your stuff instead of taking care of yourself first, But that's just like I wanted to highlight, and I didn't really know that's like it's a strong sense of duty and obligation, and sometimes we go above and beyond in our limit.
For sure. I think the one thing that's like Sal saying, there's nothing wrong with feeling a sense of duty or obligation. It's when it becomes unhealthy. That's when the problem lies in. Because I think I've shared this story before. I've had a family member in the hospital refusing to set a boundary because of his strong sense of duty and obligation that he is no longer here. And he was I was 20 something, he was only 47. Because of that strong sense of duty and obligation were turned unhealthy, so he couldn't see that it was impacting him unhealthily. So this is why we bring up these topics for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Sylvia, and Scarlett, thanks for sharing that. And so yeah, like it's having a strong sense of duty and obligation is so, I think it's important, you know, if it's part of your value system, that's great. But if it starts to affect you, and we have seen it affect people in our community, then it's one of those things where we do sort of try to work with our clients in identifying like, okay, how can you still give because you have a strong sense of duty and obligation, but give in a way that is not going to you know, severely severely ruin you financially or something. And we've used this example before too, like for example, if your family is saying, oh, you have to give 500, and you know that if you give 500, maybe you won't make your rent, or you won't make your electric bill or something like that, then if you look at your budget, what do you think you are able and willing to give? And if it was me, I'm like, I think I can maybe give 100. So then how can we communicate that to our family members and say, hey, I cannot give 500, but I can give 100. And so that's that, right? And so now it's having like, it's a whole thing that we then also have to work with our clients on, and how they think about things, because then they still like, oh, but that's, you know, what are they going to think of me? You know what? So it's then having to like work with them and reconstructing how they would, you know, reframe their giving in that way, because they're still giving, they're still obligated, you know, they still have that sense of duty and obligation to give. So you are giving, but you're not giving in a way that's going to leave you completely financially drained, right?
Yeah. And another example, so I'll give a personal example. So in regards to time, my people will say, hey, we need you from basically 10 hours. I said, I got 2 in me. And they'll be like, oh, okay, because it's a boundary that I set, because yes, I used to be a part of the whole day, whatever the setup function is, but it was too much for me. And I just literally suffered in silence when I got better with boundaries, because again, it's still fulfilling that sense of duty for me. But I said, I can give you 2 hours. And they were like, all right. Now, was it meant with contention? Absolutely. But I had to say, this is what is best for me. And this is how I still want to contribute to the cultural aspect of this.
And the interesting thing about that is, it's not like they're going to say, no, we don't want your $100. No, we don't want your 2 hours. The interesting thing about that is they're going to take it.
Absolutely.
They're going to welcome any help that you give. But sometimes it's, if we've always been thinking in our minds that, oh, I just have to, no matter what, I have to, and that's always been our mindset, it's I can see it being really difficult to sort of change that way of thinking. But I've also seen it being able to work, because we have worked with clients to be able to be okay, like give what you can and be okay with it. Give what you can and be okay with it. So again, strong sense of duty and obligations. So our next one is stage 4, disillusioned and apathy. So if you can remember from stage 1, right, where motivation and, you know, you're just excited to kind of get to know things and get to know the culture, things like that. So you have a lot of sense of excitement. Then you get to the part where you're like, maybe like 2 or 3 years later, you're like, I've been doing this for a minute now. I'm not too sure. They're always yelling at me. They're always telling me I have to give this. Now I'm just kind of like at that, you know, not too sure, you know, phase. And then you go into, well, even though I'm not sure, I'm just gonna give anyways. Why? Because it's been 5 years. I've just been doing it for 5 years, just like, so now you just continue to give out of duty, obligations, or whatnot. Now you're just at the point where you are disillusioned. and you have apathy. So apathy is just a lack of interest, a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of concern. And disillusioned is you're just disappointed. You're disappointed in something that, you discovered to be less good than what you thought it was going to be. So it's just this huge letdown. So you're just at a point, maybe 2-3 years later, after you decided to immerse yourself in the culture or community, that you're just feeling kind of a letdown. You're like, ugh, it's just not what I thought it was gonna be. And now this is usually also where I see a lot of people where they're increased fatigue. It's like their fatigue goes up and their motivation for anything cultural related goes down. They don't have, and this is also where I start to see people just kind of like stepping back slowly, very subtly. I worked with a couple that have like this is where they were at. They were leaders in a ministry, and just immersed in a community, in the culture. And years later, this is where they were at, just completely removed from culture, from community. And this is literally where they were. Like they're just kind of like, don't want to see anybody, that looks like me. It was just, in a way, it's kind of sad, because you see this strong disconnect and almost disgust even, that they have whenever we talk about anything with our culture or anything that has to do with community. Any questions or comments with this, or anything anybody want to add? Or Scarlett, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think it's typically in this phase where I see, and I've been in this phase where it was literally a crossroad if I even wanted to participate in anything cultural moving forward, because it was like, I mean, when it is the extreme letdown, it is the extreme letdown because you go into this so exciting, wanting to contribute, you have ideas, you want to share, and then you get shut down. And it's like, nope, it has to be done this way. Where I'm of the personality, I'm like, but why? Like, but can't we just add on to, I'm not saying we got to do everything, but it just gets shut down. So there's this isolation that tends to happen in this phase as well. Because it's like, all right, so that happened. I don't think I want to do this anymore. And so that's where that loss of interest happens in whatever cultural thing it is. And your emotions again tend to be apathetic because it's like, nah. And even when you hear it, you're like, nope, not doing that. And so I think that's what I think of when I think of this stage, for sure.
Yeah. I think when we ran this conversation one time, I think I remember one of our attendees sharing a story, sharing a story of how they were so hurt by their own community and culture. I think it was somewhere and it was like it was like a Chinese culture, but it's so hurt in his homeland that when he immigrated here,
Yeah.
he embodied like everything to do with the American culture. And so I think I remember when we even like was kind of going around asking what people thought of the definition for cultural fatigue. He used that story. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't identify as Chinese. I
Chinese, yep.
identify as an American, right? And so
Yeah.
this is also where we see, and I think like if we were, because it was one of the conversations like this too, because I think if we were to sit down with him and kind of, hear his story, his narrative of what kind of led him to that,
Mhm.
probably would have been something like this.
Absolutely.
Over time and whatever, it was a conversation like this, so we didn't really pry or get into it. But I'll never forget that, because he was like, I don't identify as Chinese. I'm an American, and just kind of talked with us about that. So this is also the part where we do see a lot of clients that have been hurt by culture,
Absolutely.
hurt by their communities, to where they don't want to have anything to do with their culture or their communities.
Yeah. And I remember him, him saying that because he looked he had a very heavy accent, and he was definitely, you could, if you just saw him on the street, you were like, oh, he's from China, or he's of Asian descent. but he was like, nope, not at all. I'm not. Like, he was very strong in that, and he talked about because of what he experienced and not great things that happened to, in regards to culture. And so then he had to, at some point, he started to get back into it and started to reconcile with it little by little. Didn't
Yeah.
fully immerse himself, but like reconciled with little, like piece by piece with him. So yeah, I remember that, man. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Yes, and that's why I say, like, with these different stages that we're talking about, it doesn't really go in that order that Scarlett and I have up on the presentation, where stage 1, stage, just like, no, I think it's just a way that we put together this conversation to help people conceptualize what they could be experiencing when it comes to cultural fatigue. Any other questions or comments? Nope. And then stage 5, we say, is burnout. And so these symptoms, this is not by any means a complete list of burnout symptoms. These are just very common when it comes to burnout. But these symptoms can be felt mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and culturally. And I think it's just important to kind of understand that, like, it impacts your entire being. And this is what we have seen in therapy. People that are at this stage, like, they don't come in when it's stage 1, where they're excited and they're motivated. They don't, I don't really see anyone that comes in when it's, they're kind of not sure or ambivalent about culture or anything to do with culture. Most of the people that I've seen from our community that have experienced this cultural fatigue is usually sitting with this burnout. And these are just some of those symptoms that I noted that they have experienced. And so with that, like I said, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and cultural collapse as full burnout. And so it does take a lot of having to reconcile them with all of those different areas, stages. And that's the work that we've been doing in therapy with those clients from our community, is helping them to try and reconcile with all of those different areas, going at the speed that they want it to, and whatever it is that they are open. Like, if they're not ready to be back and be excited and be motivated, I'm like, that'll come, it's okay. Just continue to work on other things as well, and then finding different ways to work with them and minimizing these burnout symptoms. You
I
want to
think,
add anything to that, Scarlett?
yeah, I think in regards to burnout, what we tend to see, and I love that you put it as a point in here, there's a lot of self-neglect that happens, which is why we get to burnout, because there's unsaid things spoken. There's a certain way that you're being talked to or treated. And it doesn't matter if it's somebody in the community or family. There's a lot of self-neglect that occurs. And so it's because that's the thing that we do in the therapy spaces, where we say, the question typically I ask is, so what do you need to do better for you so that you can participate in this if you decide to? And then immediately they would try to say, well, I need such and such to do this, like try to put the onus on someone else. And I said, no. What are you going to do? Because again, all of these community conversations is about self-awareness. What do you need to do differently? What do you need to say? Which is which is the reason we did those classes, so that you can start practicing those things. So someone in the chat has said, in social groups, it's better to start your own group with values that tie with your culture, with guidelines that are healthy. Okay. Yeah. If that's what you so desire, for sure. I think the one thing I always say to that is that, because I gotta take up for my older generation because I always give them grace, and they deserve it, because they were only doing what they were taught. And what I love that Sal and I have done, because we do get to talk to our older generation, one of the things they always say to Sal and I is, man, thank you so much for coming back and teaching us, because we just didn't know. You cannot expect them to do something different that they are unaware of. Now, can they be taught? Absolutely, because the fact that they listen to Sala and I, that's a big step. Okay. And so we really
Mhm.
appreciate that. And so yeah, if finding a different social group works for you, absolutely. And I'm always going to give grace to our older generation, because if they knew, they would have taught that. They would have taught us. They would have not withheld that information from us, for sure.
I
Go
want
ahead.
to add more, one more about cultural fatigue, right? With the different stages. I know that we in this conversation we're talking mainly in regards to ethnic cultural fatigue, but this is also applicable in different settings. Like, say for example, in a work setting, and there's because in your work setting, it has its own culture,
Oh, sure.
so it has its
Absolutely.
own dynamic and its own flow. So for example, you can, once you get a new job, that's stage one. You're excited, you're motivated to like learn this new job, right? Then you go into stage two, maybe like a year or two into the new job. You're like, oh my gosh, my supervisor is not good. I can't stand her. Why did I even, it's just like you see some things like now you're in the job and you're kind of like, it's not really working now. I'm not sure. Now you're at that ambivalence stage,
Yeah.
right? And
Sure.
then you get to the point that maybe like a year later or 6 months down the road, you're at that strong sense of duty and obligation where you're like, I really not even sure about this job right now, but I need the paycheck. So
Yep.
I'm just gonna keep going because I need to, pay my bills or something. So you
Absolutely.
have that stage three, strong sense of duty and respect. Then you have stage four, disillusioned and apathy. Now you're just like, I don't like my favorite colleague just left. They left me here. Like, I don't really like this where I'm done. Like, I am done. They're stressing me out. They're not paying me for overtime, right? You're just at that point. And then you're at stage 5 of burnout, where you've been working there for like maybe 10 years later and you are miserable and you are completely depleted, right? So I say that, I use that in a different context and example because it is applicable in different cultural settings, because I think
Absolutely.
in different settings it has its own culture and not
Yeah.
just ethnic cultural fatigue.
Absolutely. Because I had a client before where they were pretty high up on the executive ladder, and they ended up leaving because we ended up talking through these stages, because they were a complete burnout, and then they recognized that the organization in total didn't align with their values. So yes, it is applicable across e- several areas of your life. It's not just the ethnic culture that we are referencing. So we talked about all those stages. So let's talk about some self-care tips so that we can give a virtual hug. Okay. So first thing that you want to do is set realistic expectations for you. Set realistic expectations for you. Not what you think someone else is going to do. Set the realistic expectations for you. Think about how much time you would like to contribute. How much do you want to contribute to any cultural aspect of what is applicable to you. Next is make and take. Don't just make it. Make and take time for yourself. Choose a self-care activity that makes you feel replenished and rested. Doing a to-do list is not it. Because I know my people will do that. They were like, oh, I just got to do this to do. No, it's self-care, because doing a to-do list takes away from you. Because when you're doing a to-do list, oftentimes you're doing it for something or someone else. And now, the reason why I'm emphasizing make and take, because a lot of times we make it, but we don't take it. So make and take time for yourself. Next, use positive coping strategies to reduce the negative coping strategies. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, some of the negative coping strategies that we saw was excessive sleep, excessive eating, drinking, smoking, little to no eating, and such forth. So for example, you can watch a funny movie. I always recommend funny movies because what it does is it releases an endorphins that helps make you feel good. Going forward, relaxing, going for a walk, playing music, not playing music that's calming, because there's a difference. Okay. Painting, drawing, etc., journaling, whatever you desire it to be. And then the last part is share your thoughts and feelings with your emotionally safe person or journal. Again, to emphasize the emotionally safe person. So in our Know Your Feelings conversation, we went over how to identify your emotionally safe person. Please utilize those tactics to help identify who those are. Do not go to the person who you think will be helpful. You want to go to the people that you are sure within you that I know they will hear me and they will help me. And sometimes I'm going to continue to say it. That is not our family. That is not our parents. And that's okay. You have to go with what works for you, not someone else. So again, set realistic expectations, make and take time for yourself, use positive coping strategies, and share your thoughts and feelings with somebody emotionally safe. And if you don't have that person, please get a journal. And again, journaling does not mean you have to write a passage. It can be whatever you desire it to be. Or for my younger generation, sometimes what I would tell them when I used to work with younger clients, they love to video everything. So they would do a video journal. So whatever you desire it to be, let it be that. Because again, like we talked about in the Know Your Feelings, you have to give all what you're feeling inside of you a space. Because when we don't give it a space, it tends to eke out negatively in other areas of our life.
Scarlett, what's your favorite coping hobby?
Oh, my coping? Oh man, I think lately I would probably one, baking. So I love to bake. I think just personally, just for me, is painting. Like I
Okay.
love to paint. So there was a moment where I did I think in a year, I think I did over like 70 paintings. That would just be my go-to. What's yours?
No, I was hoping you would say your one, but then I was like, well, it makes sense she doesn't say it for here because Washington doesn't have any clouds that you can like sit and
Oh
watch.
yeah, cloud watching. Oh yeah, I'm a big cloud watcher. I still watch them like when they're out,
Mhm.
even when it's like kind of like not shaped well. I still do cloud watching. Cloud watching is one of my favorite things. And here's how I know I'm calm is when I can see the clouds actually move. So that's how I know I'm like peaceful within me. Because sometimes we just look at clouds, they just there. But if you actually give it space and time, you could actually see it move.
Mhm. Cloud watcher.
Yep.
Got you. All right. So a little bit more self-care tip. Learn to say no to things that you don't want to do. No is such a powerful, I think also one of the most effective boundary setting word that there is out there. So this is often something that with clients that I've seen come through the therapeutic space, experiencing cultural fatigue, um, helping them build up that confidence to say no, and you know, no saying no to things that they don't want to do, um, really takes a while. But once they are able to, they realize it's always difficult at first, and it's always met with resistance, but over time, as they kept saying their no, they kept saying no. I could see them just kind of like getting more confident in how they say their no's, and then now they're just saying no all the time. I'm like, okay, like if it's part of your value, you know. But I think like this is something that's so powerful, and often what we don't really look at a lot. But learn to say no. Learn to say no when it comes to your cultural stuff, your community stuff, your work stuff. Learn to say no to things that you don't want to do. Whenever you're feeling some type of way about something, it's always an indication that it is kind of seeping into your boundary space. And so that's an indication that's like, oh, maybe you should have just said no to that one instead of like thinking that you can when you know very well your schedule is like super packed, right? So learn to say no to things that you don't want to do. To tune into your body, as Scarlett mentioned earlier, a lot of our, and research also shares this as well. A lot of our community members, like we're more tuned into our bodies, like we're more able to, I think, report to like professionals or doctors the somatic symptoms that we're experiencing, right? And so tune into your body. If we are a lot more, if our communities are people that like we tune into our body more, like we will notice headaches all the time, tummy aches all the time, like things that are happening in our physical body. And we may think, oh, I'll just take an aspirin and I'll be good. I'll just take this and I'll be good. Like, no, your body is trying to tell you something, right? So make sure that we're tuning into to our body. So when you're feeling tired or having stomach issues, when you're breaking out in rashes all of a sudden, and maybe it's because you've been, just stressed out about a lot of things that's happening in your community at that time. Maybe I think I had a client one time that was coming in and recognized real quick what was going on culturally, what she was going through. She's like, she's been having a cold for almost a year. So she's like, I just been having this cold. I can't seem to shake it off. It's always there. And I think you could see that sort of get better for her once she started working on the issues that she was working on. So I would always kind of recommend that to our community members, like make sure that when you're tuning into your body, pay attention to what your body is trying to tell you. If you're always tired, get some sleep. A lack of sleep leads to more issues, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. And then, of course, like respond from a place of values, not your family's values, your values as an individual. Scarlett and I always say this in our community conversations too, like when you are able to take better care of yourself, the much better you will be in caring for your family or other people as well in your community. And she always says this too, like you can't give from an empty cup, right? So you can't give from something that you don't have. Like you're already depleted from giving. So make sure that you are, if it's important to you, respond to other people from that place of your values.
So quick story in regards to saying no in place of value. So, and this is regards to the workplace. I was promoted, and what I saw that they did, they were trying to overwhelm me. And I said to them, if you don't take one of these things off, you can go ahead and demote me. And that was my way of saying no and responding from a place of values, because I was like, what you're not going to do is tire me out. And they actually heard it. And then what ended up happening, they actually ended up changing the whole company policy. So I'm saying there is a way you can say no in the workplace and honor your values, because I'm like, no, I'm okay. Like, keep your money. I'm just trying to keep my head on straight and and tune into who I am, because all that they were asking me to do was quite unnecessary. And then other people who were also in those same positions, I said, and they thanked me for saying something. I said, but y'all been in this for years. Like, I just started. Like, I was only a week into that promotion. And I said, nope, what we're not going to do is run me ragged. And so they ended up changing the whole company policy. And I was glad to be able to speak from that place of values for me, and that it impacted the whole company to where now we had a difference in whoever were team leads now, that there was a difference in their demeanor in the job now. So that's one place that's one way that you can take care of yourself in the workplace. I'm always going to be an advocate for me and whoever I'm a part of. So that is the end of our community conversation. So again, we want to thank you all. We appreciate you all so entire much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Again, if you go home today and you have any more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. As Leslie put in the chat, that there is the event summary, and in the event summary is Sala and I's contact information. So again, we thank you. Sala, is there anything you wanted to say before I pass it on over?
Yes, we have one comment. This has been great. I'm one of the counselors here at Green River. We often see students who are living on the hyphen or live in at least two cultures. Yep. I imagine you both experience this with your clients. Do you see clients who are dealing with cultural fatigue in regard to more than one culture that they are trying to navigate? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's on, they may be experiencing like the ethnic cultures of the United States, and then they're a native one. Then they have the culture, especially if they're students in school. And so then they also have to, especially also if they're working, or it's so many aspects that we see that really we just try to help them come to a place of balance.
Thank you so much.
Or the multiracial as well, right? Like multiracial clients, and they're always just trying to, when they go to like what I've experienced is I have a client that had come in. I'm like, I can't be Samoan enough for my Samoan side. I can't be
Yep.
Tongan enough for my Tongan side, so they're just kind of like really in the between and trying to figure out like how do I navigate through these two different cultures that I have, cultural identities that I have.
Absolutely. So,
Well, I
Leslie,
think
we're
we're
going to
coming
turn
to
it
the
on.
closure of our program, and also this is the last program of this year. So we do look forward very much for next year's series as we continue to collect resources and advice from you folks. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Malo
Thank you
opito.
so much. Thank you so much, Voice of the South Pacific. And again, so be on the lookout because we coming back. Okay. And so we appreciate you all again. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us because again, we love helping our community out in any capacity that we can. Have a wonderful holiday. May it be fulfilled and with whatever you desire to do. So Leslie, I'm going to officially turn it over to you so you can officially close this out.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for tuning in for today's session. Special thanks to our experts, Sala and Scarlett, for their time and sharing more about today's topic. This is our last episode of the series, so thank you all for tuning in. For those of you tuning in for the GRC Student Union, we have post-event surveys that you can share with us your thoughts and what you would like to hear us cover in the future. Take care, everybody.
Bebo sako tukuna awasenga ni mai baka waletaka baleti kombona mai buni nongusika lutundi